Okay, so we have my cobbled together spreadsheet here. We're going to take a look at 4 different dimensions: case neck thickness, case rim thickness, primer cup depth, and the brass weight. Where to start? Well, probably the most popular thing that people weigh is brass weight. So let's start there. Um, Now, I did not do internal case volume. It's not something I usually do. This is a military surplus rifle that I'm not very competitive with, so I don't see the need to go to that degree. However, I do want to note that brass weight is not a direct correlation with its internal volume. I'm going to stop there, and we're just going to take a look at the numbers. Starting broadly, the PPU is generally more heavy, but only by about 8 grains. Well, 7.5 if you want to get picky, but we're going to say 8 grains. And in general, it did measure worse. However, it's not a huge ballpark of difference. I mean, if we look at this alone, I paid a little over $30 for 50 pieces of Ppu Brass, and I paid around $50 for the Hornady. So it's just shy of 50% more costly. That's not really reflected in these numbers. However, there's a caveat. When you take a more close look at these, yeah, the numbers for the PPU are generally more over the place, like more all over the place, I meant to say. Whereas for Hornady, if we delete this one number, this 165, look at the standard deviation down here. We delete that one number out of 20, and it pretty much is cut in half. So, yeah, Hornady in general measures notably better, but there's still some elements to quality control that makes it not quite as good. So that could have been enough, maybe, to throw things off, but there's other factors, which is why we have these other dimensions. Let's take a look at this primer cup depth, however you want to word it. Long story short, Hornady was very consistent. 126 across the board. And I only did 5 pieces. I wasn't going to do the full 20. I think this is a good enough representation. In fact, there's the argument here that even with doing 20, that's a pretty small sample size. So we're just going to go with it. With PPU, you can see here they're slightly deeper, but furthermore, 129, 131, and then the rest are just the 130. So there's some inconsistency here. How much is it going to affect it? I don't know. We're going to find that out when these finally print on paper. However, there is kind of, in my opinion, a growing movement of people who are paying attention to primer seating depth. I always seat my primers flush, and so doing this here, doing it blindly, there would be a difference here. How much does 1/1000ths, or rather 2/1000ths, make for striking a primer? I'm not entirely sure, but if seating bullets 3/1000ths has a measurable difference, why wouldn't a difference in primer seating depth, especially when the consistency of ignition is what's really important when it comes to loading ammo and getting shots down range, especially at long range. So, right there, that might be the difference. We'll find out. Anyway, going on to case rim thickness, I don't want to spend too much time on this because case rim thickness is an issue if you're, how to word it. The 303 British is a rimmed cartridge. It head spaces off of the rim. So if you're a person who's doing a true full-length sizing true full-length sizing, that's what I meant to say, and you're not doing a bump size, we're only bumping the shoulder back 2/1000ths from your chamber, which, by the way, does allow you to get outside of semi-spec. That's definitely a reality with these old Milser rifles, right? They were created to be cheap in lots, not necessarily to have, they weren't built with reloading in mind. So, yeah, this is something to pay attention to if you're one of those people. That said, what did I do? I measured the brass thickness on one side, then I turned around 180 and measured the other side because I think that this will be a good measure of precision, but furthermore, if it's head spacing off of that, I mean that's a difference, isn't it? Like that might affect brass longevity, which is really ultimately what I hope to measure with these two. That's going to be a part 2 to this video because if I'm lucky, brass lasts 10 rounds for my 303 British. I'm happy if I get over 6, but 10 is pretty much the extreme limit there. If I get anything more than that, I'm happy, but I don't carry the expectation. I try to go for at least 6. Anyway, you'll see here extreme spread, the difference between doing a 180 measure of each side, PPU 3000s, but generally they are thicker. And by the way, I believe the original military spec was 62 thousandths. So these are closer to military spec. This would matter more, but they're also a little bit more wobbly. How much is 1,000ths of a difference going to make? Or rather, 2,000ths going to make? I'm not entirely sure, but again, we're going to find out. Hornady is generally thinner, but a little bit more consistent, but not by much. Anyway, lastly, and probably the most important, case neck thickness. So, I have an RCBS Case Master, and what I did, I measured the thickness of the brass around the case mouth, and I noted the thinnest and then the thickest points. In general, you'll see that it's not a huge amount of difference, about 1,000ths. For 20 pieces, Parvi Partisan, 11.5, rounding, of course. For Hornady, a little bit over 11 thousandths. That's not bad. I mean, that's kind of why when I do case turning, I think I turn it down to 10 thousandths, but moving on. Now, here's the interesting thing. Parvi Partisan, the general difference between the two, between the minimum and maximum, is actually, it's not bad. It's less than 1,000ths. The standard deviation is 0.5, which basically means that, again, it's not bad. When we look over at the Hornady, we see that the average of the difference is higher. It's almost like 100%. It is 100% more, and then some. So the difference between the thickness and how thin and how thick the case mouth is on either side or at different points of the brass is worse for Hornady. But see how I put standard deviation here just for funsies? This is less, which basically means that yes, the Hornady is consistently more off kilter. So that's weird. And we're going to see how that affects things downrange. I'm sounding like a broken record now. But in the grand scheme of things, for the extreme spread, both of them got 2,000ths, but you'll notice that Hornady has like nothing here that are, I don't want to say perfectly round, but these got close enough that I marked them with 0. Not even half a thousandths like these ones, but there's 3 for the PPU that came out as 0. There's none for the Hornady that came out like that. Usually it's 1,000ths all the way up to 2. Whereas for the PPU, there's only 1, I believe, that came out as 2. So good job, PPU. It's probably why I had no problem generally buying PPU brass for my 303 British. But again, this is going to be part of a series for demonstrating, and we're going to see how all these various factors affect things on paper. So that said, now we get to go through the fun part of loading up. I think I'm only going to do 20 of each again, and we're going to see how each one prints on paper doing a load development using the same bullets, same primer, same powder, just different brass. Okay, quick little update because I also got in a batch of Remington Brass, and long story short, it is somewhere in between PPU and Hornady for measurement. It's really exemplified here in the primer cup depth. Really consistent, 127 pretty much across the board, except for one of the sample of 5, where I repeatedly just got a little bit less on the measurement. So I put in 1265. That is a subjective input I put in there, but it was repeatably and demonstratably shallower. Okay, let's do a very quick visual inspection. On the left you have Ppu, in the middle you have Hornady, and then on the right you have Remington. Look at the difference in the shoulders, just so it focuses better. The difference down below near the case head. And then let's look down into the case mouth. The Hornady in the middle definitely looks notably brighter. That's a little bit dingy, and that is definitely dark. There, better focus. I'm wondering if I should do some additional measurements, but either way, these are definitely different dimensions that are going to affect things. But still, we're going to load them up and see how they print on paper compared next to one another. Okay, gents, you're going to have to forgive the poor lighting. I moved my reloading bench yet again, but let's get to it. So I am reloading 303 British. We're using Ppu bullets. They're match bullets, which aren't very match. I'm not going to go on a tirade about those. I've already done a video. These I'm using because I'm basically fireforming this brass. What we have is Ppu in 3 rows, Remington in 3 rows, and Hornady in 3 rows. We're using IMR 3031 for powder, and as I'm seating my bullets, I'm using my Redding seating die, complete with the micrometer upgrade. What I wanted to show before I finished seating the bullets was basically the internal volume. If you want the short version, I don't see a discernible difference. I'm sure that if I were to do measuring internal case volume the proper way, like figure out how many milliliters these held, I would find a measurable difference. However, I'm not doing that, and I just wanted to show you what it looks like. And oh, by the way, 36 grains, 36.5, 37, 37.5. Did I just spill some? Oh my god. I'll check it in a little bit. I don't see any kernels. Okay, good. Anyway, then lastly, 37. So we still have room to grow for a maximum charge. I'm not worried about it though, because basically we're fireforming these and just being silly and working up a load in the meantime, because we can do a relative comparison in that time. Anyway, so this is Ppu. It's kind of dark in there, so it's going to be hard for the camera to focus. And you can see it's approximately, we're just going to say a centimeter. It's about a centimeter down in there. We go up to Remington. It's a little bit brighter, but again, it's like about a centimeter below the shoulder. Lastly, the Hornady. It's brighter down in there. In fact, you can even see the reflections of the kernels. It's causing a little bit of a optical illusion for us. But again, it's about a centimeter down in there. So again, not much of a discernible difference. Let me finish seating bullets. I can't head out to the range today. It's actually night right now. So this weekend, I'll probably head on out and we'll see how they all do in comparison to one another. Again, 50 yards with iron sights. It's just a very general, subjective comparison. I gotta do this really quick because someone's waiting on me. This is Ppu Brass. Despite the primer issues, it's kind of funny how the groups do look kind of similar. The ones marked with the diagonal are from Ppu, the ones unmarked, that's going to be Remington. So it's going to be kind of hard doing a group diagnosis going forward.
Anyway, so I believe it's 1, 2, and 3. Then over here, 1, 2, 3. So this is definitely by far the best for that. This is actually just maybe a little bit worse. But yeah, 1, 2, 3. And then, yeah, 1, 2, 3. Huge shift to the point of impact there, and difference between the brasses. But when we go up to 37 grains, pretty similar. Again, in terms of like relative group shape. And what is it? 1, 2, and 3. Definitely a point of shift impact. And it's only the highest charge that we see our primer issues go away. Very curious that. This is with the Remington Brass. The case necks are a lot more dirty. And also look at this. Primers are being slightly pushed out. This is not from overpressure. This is actually from under pressure. So, yeah. But it'll get better as we go up in charge. Okay, so now we got to sort this out. So, if you see a diagonal, again, that's Ppu. If you see a horizontal, that's Remington. So the ones unmarked, those are Hornady. And that's what we're looking for. And it looks like horizontal stringing here. 1, 2, and 3. So that's the minimum charge. That was 35 grains. This one looks totally different. Whereas the other ones definitely have verticality there. This one, you still have some verticality, but it opened up. It's triangular, I guess we'll go ahead and say, and the point to shift to impact is definitely different. Then let's see, we're here, and there. So, very open. And kind of the same size. So this is going to be 36.5, so we have there, and there. So we're seeing like a uniformity in group size here, and also group shape. That's not bad. Like, that's nothing to complain about. And then, let's see, what do we do for the maximum charge? There, but stand by. Okay, so my eyes are apparently still, the sun is right there, right in my eyes. So if you see a general amount of verticality to these groups, you'll know it's me having issues focusing on the front sight post. But yeah, I think it's right there, and then I think we have an overlap there. So the maximum charge was definitely not it. The Hornady definitely did like noticeably worse across the board, we can say. But also the shift to the point of impact was noticeably different. So very, very strange. Anyway, someone else is out here. They want to put up targets and start shooting, so I got to wrap this up. Maybe I'll do a group analysis when I get back to the bench.
It is a day later. I've been meditating upon these. I've been reviewing some of the footage, and at the range, when I was making the original footage, I could tell I was in a rush. I was misspeaking a lot and making a lot of mistakes. I'm not very happy with it, but I'm going to try to salvage it by doing this quick little overview here. Ppu Brass is in red, Remington is in blue, and Hornady is in green. So again, this is not conclusive, this is not definitive. This is just saying, hey, we did a load workup with factory fresh brass. Let's see how they do, and let's see how they compare with one another. So that said, let's get to it. So red first, Ppu. In general, you can see that the rifle wants the group to the lower left of the center of the target. So we did not too bad starting off. But then, with the second charge up, the group really opened up and went to the lower right by quite a bit. I'm willing to blame the garbage bullets I'm using because they are not consistent in the least. About 1 in 10 is definitely a flyer, and that could be it here. But on the flip side, well, when we compare with other groups, I think it's also the load. But moving on, when we get to the third charge, or the middle charge of what I used, the point of impact kind of centered up again, but it went down. And the group, although it's opened up, it's not as bad as number 2. The last 2 groups, they look really nice. Those are about 1 inch, which again, I'm just using a front rest with iron sights. So I'm not going to complain with the size of these groups. Where I am going to complain, though, is look, we have another uh, down here is where the center of the point of impact is. It's almost below where the center of the target is, nowhere near where the 8 is. And what's very interesting is when you compare it to the second group, where that flyer went, look, it's about the same area. Curious that. And then the final charge, it stayed about the same size, but you can see it jumped up to the upper left again. It's almost in line with what we have for the original point of impact, but it's actually a little bit to the upper left. So even though these look nice for groups, this is actually terrible because of the huge shifts in the point of impact. So this is definitely hard to stick with Ppu Brass and resize it to the same dimensions as before. This would actually be an area I'd want to stay away from. That said, moving on to blue, or rather I should say Remington. Again, to the lower left in general, but look at the pattern that we see as we move up. It goes from, again, centered a little bit below the 8, but about right there, to above the 8, a little bit to the upper right, then to the left, then to almost square on, and then to the upper left again. So definitely, and the groups don't look overall that bad in terms of size. I think that kind of speaks a little bit to the consistency of the brass, but there's so much shifts in the point of impact that, I'm willing to say it is probably because of the load, because these were underpowered. We knew that from how the primers reacted. But yeah, this is there's nothing really great here for follow-up load development. It's really just kind of further fireforming the brass and seeing how those do. Lastly, we have Hornady. So again, to the lower left, and the first group is even more to the left of the 8. I mean, it could have been a flyer because, again, garbage bullets, but who knows? We're just going to interpret what's on paper. Next charge up, it looks definitely worse when you compare it to the other previous two groupings we had, which even looks kind of similar, right? We have 2 shots that are really close, and then a third flyer that's definitely to the lower left. That's why I like doing brass comparison videos. It's interesting seeing some of the similarities. But here we have a jump to the left, and then it jumps down to, again, below the 8. And one thing that's very curious, though, is when we look at the next group, again, a little bit below the 8. So that's actually pretty nice. That's a very similar grouping in terms of the point of impact. Like, this might be a good place to start some load development, because even though in general I feel like the Hornady groups are larger than what I got with the other 2, I feel like it is more consistent, and I also like how the bullet patterns, with the exception of this one, look better than the other groups. It's hard to explain, because I feel like groups like this and this and this, where the bullet spread looks almost even or triangular, I feel like they're more honest than these other groups where we have 2 close together than 1 flyer that's out. I would far rather get a more consistent grouping than something that looks more sporadic, I'll go ahead and say. But yeah, this final group, definitely, I'm not sure what happened there, but things definitely went to garbage, both in terms of the group size, but also in terms of the point of impact shift. That scares me. But it kind of goes to show like how things develop. So there you go, a quick little rough fresh from the factory comparison of brass and how they did with a low development fresh out of the box.